Yeah, we're going to spend a little time talking about themes, the themes of the American History Advanced Placement Exam. So I'm going to go back and start with skill number 1, where we first talked about themes, what's the theme, and how we take different information, names, dates, events, and we attempt to put them in a historical framework where they have more meaning. And I first introduced these themes underneath this particular skill. And here's the list of themes below, and now we're going to go into a little more detail talking about these themes in the hopes that you will have a better understanding of how to put those names, dates, facts, events into these themes. Okay, so the first thing I want to introduce to everyone, if you haven't seen this before, is that we have a little acronym that we use to help us remember our themes. We have belief systems, America and the world with an A, geography, environment, politics, power, identity, peopling, and economy. And if you take the first letter of each of these words, you'll notice that we get a little word here, and it is bagpipe. So sometimes in class you'll hear history teachers refer to bagpipe themes, and they'll ask you to apply your understanding or your facts, dates, and events to those particular themes. Now I'm going to briefly go through each of these themes and talk a little bit about and let you read about as I talk about the particulars of these themes, these different themes. So first we're going to start with belief systems. And I have taken this list, which was found on the AP Central website, and I have changed it a little bit, but I did so to try to make it a little more simplified so it wasn't so much to try to remember. So when we talk about belief systems, we're talking about ideals, ideology. I put religion with morality. Those tend to go together sometimes. Art, literature, and cultural values. A lot of our cultural values can be reflected in the arts and literature of the day. Science and philosophy, sometimes they tend to go together. And pop culture also is a part of our belief systems. All of these different subtopics affect our belief systems. America and the world. America's role in the world as we compete for resources and dominance. How we apply our foreign policy and diplomacy. Expansionism, including our effects or our attempts at imperialism. Our motivations as world actions. Are we, what motivates us to go into the world stage and attempt to make treaties and establish trade and fight wars, global conflicts, military and economic involvement in the developing world. So you can see how some of these subtopics tend to overlap, and hopefully that helps you get a better sense of what it means when we say America and the world. It's the way that America as a country goes into the world, competes for resources, tries to develop trade, and apply our ideals of democracy and liberty around the world, and to ensure that even by going as far as fighting wars. Geography and physical and human effects on the environment. This is a pretty big current day topic. We're going to talk about how climate and geography affect people, how it affects the economy, and how people affect the environment through natural and man-made structures. And there are lots of examples of this in American history that we can talk about. We can talk about how the South and the North developed differently according to climate and geography. We can talk about how they developed differently because of natural resources. And we can talk about trade and how the Columbian Exchange affected the development of the colonies. We can talk about how trade is affecting our foreign policy today in the United States. All those different types of subtopics are within geography and environment. Peopling. This is movement of people around the world, or around the United States, excuse me. We're going to talk about demographics, population, and group statistics, where certain groups tend to settle, why they settle there, and how they affect the areas once they do settle there in large numbers, the influence of the Irish, the Chinese, the influence of African Americans. Also, how these different groups affect nativism, how people respond to these different groups, these cultural groups, and whether that response is good or bad or appropriate. Impact of European exploration on indigenous populations. How did the Europeans affect, for instance, the Native American population? And this is a topic that runs throughout U.S. history. It is also a topic that you can talk about as far as imperialism. Identity, gender, class, racial, and ethnic identities. Gender roles. How do women's roles in the family change over time? Class. How does class change over time for different groups? For African Americans, Latinos. Also, national identity. How important is national identity versus racial and ethnic identity? Regional identity. Do you find that your Southern identity is more important than your national identity? And how does it affect your patriotism? And assimilation. How far should we go to have different ethnic groups follow or fall into our nationalistic ideals? Or how do we, how far do we go in pushing those people to become more quote-unquote American? Politics and power. This subtopic has to do basically with government, interpretation of documents, political processes, the party system, how it changes and evolves over time, liberty, rights, democracy, citizenship, and the role of the state. How powerful should the state be, and how does that idea change over time, and how does it not change over time? Economy, work, trade, and technology. And again, I've gone through these topics, and I have combined some of them. You'll see that I have connected agriculture with land distribution. Obviously, you can't have agriculture if you don't have land. Commerce, trade, globalization of trade, exchanges, economic developments like industrialization, manufacturing, labor systems, labor and social class, changes over time with that, and continuities. Innovation and technology, transportation, and other ideas about the role of government, capitalization, free markets, communism, socialism. How much should the government regulate economy and trade? So throughout all these examples, I hope that you were hearing as I was talking through some overlap with some of these different themes, that the government roles sometimes affect peopling and movement and migration, like with the Indian Removal Act, how economy tends to affect ethnicities, and how it affects labor. Sometimes we need women to go into the workforce more, and that would be during the World Wars. And then how that's attempts are made to change that again once the wars are over. Changes in identity based upon immigration. All those types of different overlaps that we can see in these subtopics. Hopefully that helps you a little bit feel a little more relaxed about these long lists of themes. So I'm going to apply this one to the 1960s. We're going to look at each theme, each bagpipe theme, and look at a few examples here. Hopefully this helps you see how we can take bagpipe and apply it to an era, and we can see change, and we can see continuity. So first we're going to talk about belief systems. A lot of ethnicities are looking for more equality and justice, and they are reaching back to the ideals of the Declaration of Independence, and they're looking for change. America and the world, global context, the struggle with the communists, the Cold War, and this is the United States attempting to have the continuity in the idea of spreading democracy around the world, and having to face the changes that need to be made at home to ensure that liberty for all ethnic groups. Geography and environment. Also, this is an era with issues with environmental protection. The publication of the book Silent Spring, which talks about the effects of man in the industrialism era on the environment. Nixon's first recognition of that by creating the Environmental Protection Agency will come a little later. That's one of the changes where the United States actually begins to get a little more involved in that. But in another way, it's a continuation of the policies of Teddy Roosevelt and the progressives. Politics and power. Again, we're on a world stage struggling against communism in Vietnam. This harkens back to the imperialistic era, a continuation of spreading democracy and the ideas of President Wilson to make the world safe for democracy. It's a continuation of those ideals. Identity. How do people change their views of themselves? We have those ethnic groups we were talking about back up in the civil rights era up at the top with belief systems. They're wanting more liberty. They've been looking for this since the Emancipation Proclamation. The ideas are the same as they have been from the beginning, but the change is needed. Peopling. People are moving to the suburbs out of the cities. This is a change where poverty and racial strife are present in the cities. A change to moving to these areas. However, as far as continuity, people have continued to move throughout the United States. They move for different reasons, and migration is a part of our history, going all the way back to the Great Migration from the Puritan era, and also in the migration of people to the cities looking for jobs. Economy, work, exchange, technology. People are beginning to see a change in the types of jobs available. We have becoming less of a manufacturing power, and therefore we have to open up trade. This is another change in the United States. However, it is continuous with our beginnings, where we had a lot of trade with the New England areas. Also, culture is very influential, and the 1960s in political messages for protest against the Vietnam War coming through in music. And you can connect this to the Great Awakening and other movements that go back throughout the United States history, trying to get people out of the house to advocate for change. The Progressive Era, also advocating for changes, Prohibition. Can talk about those issues of morality that flow through those eras of the Great Awakening, pop culture, advocates for peace. And also you can look at how higher education is becoming more of a priority. You can see that with the space race. The United States has always had a goal of educating its population all the way back to the Puritans. That's continuous. However, it's changing a bit because we're becoming more of a technological power. So in summary, remember the overlap that exists with these themes, and apply this as you learn about specific facts to put your learning in a framework so it has meaning and not just a jumble of names, and also you can see the continuity and change.